This is video 17 on the book of Esther, and it is kind of a recap, but it's something that I found extremely interesting in going through this. Myself, being a mathematician, I tend to analyze and overanalyze and look at and turn it around this way and look at it and things like this. But so far we've covered 8 chapters, I believe, 8 chapters on the book of Esther. And during these 8 chapters, we have found out lots of things, but we've forgotten lots of things. The first thing that I want to remind you is that everything's in the Bible for a reason. Everything. There is even the minutest detail is there for a reason. And so we need to see what happens, and we need to see how it happens and how fast it happens and things like this. If you remember, Haman got mad at Mordecai because he wouldn't bow down to him. Now, if we go back and look at everything from a timeline as such, the first thing that we find as a time was that King Ahasuerus comes to power. Now, it is in approximately, he thinks, year 67 of the 70 years that Israel is to be in Babylonian captivity. And on the 3rd year after that, there's a banquet, and it lasts 180 days. When that banquet is over with, there's another banquet that is just for the city of Shushan, and it lasts 7 days. And that's where Queen Vashti gets in trouble, because she will not come to the banquet wearing nothing but the crown. And so then we have this thing, what am I going to do with her? What am I going to do about her defying my orders, etc., etc.? And she gets put back in the harem somewhere, lost forever. Some say that she was killed. We're not specifically told that she's killed, but some say that happened. But we have this man that comes up with this idea, well, you need to get rid of her. You need to, save our houses too, because our wives will revolt against us. And so that's where Haman comes in. Now, Haman and Mordecai, they get into this fuss over Mordecai not bowing down to him. And so we find out in before too long, we find out that there was a search all over the kingdom for a brand new queen. And so Mordecai brings his daughter, the girl that he, the girl that he raised. He brings her and says, don't tell them that you're a Jew, but you're a good-looking girl, and you might become queen. And who knows? So the first time that Queen Esther goes in and has a night with the king is 7 years. 7 years after King Ahasuerus comes to power. This is found in chapter 3, verse 7. Chapter 2, verse 16. 2:16. Well, Haman and Mordecai get into this fuss. Haman goes to some of his buddies. They start casting the chicken bones or the rocks or whatever, and they determine that the Jews all need to be killed on a certain day, and it's the 13th day of uh, Adar, of the month of Adar. Now, this was determined in chapter 3, verse 7. And so he talks to the king. The king says, yes, okay, that's fine. That's fine. Here's my ring. Go write the decree and send it out. So they write this decree that all of the Jews would be killed and all of their property, you can have it, take it, it's free on a certain day. That was sent out chapter 3, verse 12. Then we have in chapter 5 where Mordecai tells Esther to go be before the king and plead for your people. And if you remember correctly, she says, sure, I'll do that. But you've got to do something for me. You've got to fast and pray for 3 days. Now, she says, gather all the people around Shushan, Jewish people that are believers, and fast and pray for 3 days. When she goes into the king, uninvited, the king has to extend his scepter to her. Now, this is on the 3rd day, right after the 3rd day, pardon me. Chapter 5. The king extends the scepter. He says, what do you want? Up to half of the kingdom, I'll give it to you. This is where we come up with this, the question about what do you want? What is your petition? What is your request? Difference between a petition and a request. She says, well, really what I want is I want you and Haman to come tomorrow to a banquet also. First you come today, the second banquet tomorrow. So that all happens. The first banquet is over with. It's the next day. Haman has to lead a horse with Mordecai sitting on it all through the city. He has to stand up and say, this is the way the king honors somebody that is the friend of the king's. He's very disgruntled and he goes home. In chapter 6:14, now we're just before he goes to the second banquet. And so in chapter 7, we have all of these things that have happened. The queen tells the king, my people are going to be killed. Help me. I'm going to be killed. Help me. My people are going to be killed. The king wants to know who gave such a decree. She says, this evil man, Haman. The king goes outside. Haman falls on top of her. The king walks in immediately, and they take him out and hang him. Okay, so this is where this is all of the things in a row. But we need to look at something. The casting of the lots, where Haman decides the day, the casting of the lots took place in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus. It took place on or about the 13th day of Nisan, when the king gave Haman his ring and says, have them write this, and sent them out, we are told specifically in chapter 3, verse 11, it's the 13th day of Nisan. The day that was chosen was the 12th month and the 13th day, exactly a year. In the Jewish calendar, there are 12 months, just like in the Gregorian calendar that we use. Only our months are 30 and 31 days, except for the month of February. Their calendar was 29 days. They were on a lunar calendar. It's 29 days, but every so often they would have a leap month. And that's a different story. But anyway, they had the 12 months, and they were in the civil calendar. They were Tishri, Hezvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shevat, Adar, Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, and Elul. Now, the month of Nisan is the first month of the religious calendar. The religious calendar is the month that starts with Passover, but we noticed that this was on the 13th of Nisan, which is the day before Passover. We noticed that the month that is chosen is the 13th day of Adar, which is a whole year away, 12 months later. And so we look at this. Now, I want to show you one other thing before we stop this one. In chapter 8, in chapter 7, where Haman is hanged, and that happens in just 6 days after it's been made notice. We have, if you can remember this, back from chapter 8, there was a fast day. There was 3 fast days. There was the day it was written, and if you'll pray and fast for 3 days. So we prayed fast, pray and fast, pray and fast. Then she went into the king that day, and they had the first banquet. Then they had the second banquet. That was the next day. At the end of the second banquet, we have Haman being killed. When Haman is killed, Queen Esther gets all of the estate of Haman, and Mordecai is raised up to be second in command of all the land. When God is in it, everything just opens up and it just happens quickly. When God is in it, it takes something for God to be in it. What did it take for God to be in the middle of this? Even though God's not mentioned anywhere, what did it take? If you will fast and pray, if you'll turn your heart to God and fast and pray, then God will move quickly on your behalf. Fast and pray. You can't do it just for, I'm going to do without cheeseburgers, or I'm going to do without soda pop, or I'm going to do without a Brahms milkshake. It's, where's your heart? Turn it to God, fast and pray, and get your heart right with God, and God does things in a hurry.